All right, welcome back to Old School, New School on EMS responders. Damn it.
No, it's responders.
First responders.
First responders talk.
First responders
Is
talk.
that what we called it?
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to call it.
Yeah.
We can just use that intro right now.
No.
We're not sure what we're doing yet.
No.
All right.
All right, welcome back to First Responders Talk. This is an episode of Old School, New School. My name is KJ Jolson. I'm an EMR in Edmonton, in Alberta.
And I'm Jason Jolson. I'm an ACP in Alberta.
Today, we've got a couple topics to talk about. We're going to talk about professionalism and a bit about documentation and just why they're important.
Well, and the big one about, I think, professionalism is that how we do our jobs. And we both work at a station in Edmonton, Alberta. It's up in Northwest. And there's this amazing Tim Hortons. Well, I don't know if it's amazing Tim Hortons or maybe it's just the wonderful woman that works there in the morning.
But that's kind of part of it, though, right? If you have amazing employees, right, you'll perceive the place as excellent, even though it could be two employees who will give you a great experience, but you'll still go there.
Have you been there in the afternoon?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a total different vibe. They're still good, but it's not the same as we're getting from...
The employee in the morning is to the
we
fact
should probably
that...
call her... give her a name. Sally. We don't want to give her a real name out, but Sally's like amazing.
For the whole station, which consists of got to be over 150.
Well, there's probably easily 300 people at that station.
And she almost has every order like memorized to a T. Like walk in there and she's had it prepped before I've showed up before.
Well, and there's industrial area. There's guys showing up in their work trucks. There's people getting ready to go to work with businesses, and they walk through the door, and she already knows everybody's order. So as you're coming up professionally, she knows exactly what you want. Sometimes she even has the order going before you even get there, which if you decide you didn't want that today, you didn't want the maybe the sausage and egg, you wanted just the egg.
It means you don't get a choice.
Yeah, you don't
She's
have a choice
decided for you.
But she's ready to get your food going, and then you're not standing in line waiting 30 minutes for your food.
No, and she's very good at getting everybody out and keeps the line flowing. So on her side, not only is she doing well as an employee, but she's also doing a great experience for the customer.
Oh, exactly. And then, so when you're thinking about this, a funny story. I went there with one of my other clinical educators, and his name's Chad, and he orders this really cool ice brew coffee, and it's got some espresso foam thing on the top. I don't even know what it is, but we ordered it, and I actually went back the next day, and this gentleman's name is actually Chad, but I'll throw him out under the bus easily. I'll tell his name. So I walked up to Sally, and I said, Sally, I want Chad. Okay, that just didn't sound as good as it did when I did it in Tim Hortons. I said, I wanted the Chad. And she goes, oh, you want the cold brew with the espresso foam on top and everything? And I was like, wow, we've never called it Chad before, but she knew exactly what it was. So now there's a coffee up there that Tim Hortons called the Chad.
Because Chad just kept ordering it.
So when we're talking about professionalism and the experience you get when you deal with people that are professional is amazing. It sets the thing up. So if you think of EMS as practitioners, we need to be professional all the time, especially with our patients, because our patients basically are our customer, and usually we're dealing with our patients. They're not in the having the best time at that moment. So it's very important to be, you know what I mean, like professional when we do it. So one of the biggest things is that you come through the door, right? And they're the first time they've seen you. They expect you to look a certain way, even the way you present yourself, but mostly just the way you even look, right? So I'm telling you, I remember one time I was working with a gentleman. His name's Kelly Brown. Everybody knows in this area who he is. He's an ex-military medic also. And if you're not working with him, when you're working with him, you got to be tight. The guy used to almost dress me in the morning. He'd come in and fix my epaulaps, make sure my shirt was fully buttoned, which it was, but he always had to double check. But there's people out there that I remember one day we were sitting in the ER waiting to get our patient, and another crew rolls in, and the guy actually has his shirt untucked. His boots, like the soles, were barely attached to the part of the boot. His pants were actually, one pant leg was stuck in his socks, the other one is. And I granted it was in the, not the wee early of the morning, right? 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he looked so disheveled. He was super unshaven. He just looked a mess. And first of all, I would not have the confidence if that person walked through my door. Just that alone. Even though, you should never judge a book by a cover, we need to have a certain way we need to look. We need to look tight. We need to look clean. We actually, basically what it does is it builds confidence in your patient. It's the first thing they see you, and they got to be able to buy in that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's certainly right. Dress appropriately. Dress the way that if you wanted them to show up, you would want them to be fully dressed. You wouldn't want like untucked and and keep like uniforms clean, right? You want your uniform clean. Don't have like your sandwich stains all over it. Now, I mean, if you're eating in your truck and you get try to clean it the best you can. Sometimes while you're on shift, it's a little hard, but sometimes you bring an extra
but if
uniform.
it's the same shirt for the last month.
Change the
With
shirt.
the same stain on it. If you're not smart enough to clean that shirt, then maybe you shouldn't be in the industry either. But the biggest thing is that we know the first impressions. If you look at advertising, whatever, they spend tons of money on how they package things because it's the first impression. That's how you get people to get the confidence initially with you. So once you get through the door and you actually look good.
Well, and as much as we say we don't want to you don't judge a book by its cover, we all know that when somebody comes to most of us profile somebody when you come through the door wearing like a certain uniform, right? If you expect a police officer to come through your door and he's a mess, right? You wouldn't expect that from police. You wouldn't expect that from fire.
No.
They shouldn't right for EMS. You should be just as professional.
Exactly. And then also the way you act, actually. So when you come through the door, you want to act professional, right? Mm-hmm. One of the big ones we always get in trouble for, you always hear people like, well, we need you to take your boots off. And that's a sticking point. For us, you can't take your boots off because it's
a safety thing.
It's a safety thing. If you injure your foot and you took your boot off, it becomes a workers' comp issue. It gets really bad. It becomes a real problem. But you still can have respect. You can understand them. And the way you act and the way you handle it is that instead of just saying, I can't take my boots off, sorry, explain to them why, right? Give them the reason why you can't take your boots off and move ahead. Be polite. Introduce yourself.
That's the big one I find is introducing yourself. For doing interhospital transfers, patients like it when you introduce themselves, mostly because it gives them a name and it gives them kind of confidence because now they know you a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of you're just a strange EMS unit kind of standing there looking at them. Right?
Well, and usually when you give them, like, say, hi, I'm Jason, they'll usually tell you their name, right? The name that they want to be called. So if it's an older lady, she might say, oh, I'm Mrs. Jones. And then to call them Mrs. Jones, not honey, love, that kind of thing.
Well, and the other thing is, too, is sometimes, and you can ask that, too, if you have a patient, right? Oh, do you prefer being called Bill or do you prefer called, like, William? I've had that before. His whole name was William and he preferred to be
Yeah, and
Bill.
sometimes you make a mistake. If they correct you, just use the name that they corrected you with and you can move on. It won't be a really big issue. Again, that's how we act, right? Like, come in, be appropriate, understand that usually, and for the EMS side, like, or the emergency side, we're coming in their worst needs, right? They haven't cleaned their house. They're not expecting company. They brought us in. So we got to kind of control that judging too, like where we're going. Sometimes we're going into maybe the unnice area of town, right? More the seedy area, and then you're going to go to the apartment. You already have a bias. So you already are getting your nose out of joint. And then you walk through the doorway and it turns out they're really nice people that just need some help. So
if you've been working a long shift, right? Even though you've been working a long shift and it's, maybe you're close to end time or you get that late call, as much as, we all want to be grumpy about it. Again, if you just be professional, just go in there, right? Sometimes a smile is just enough to get somebody to cooperate with you.
Yeah. And it actually comes down to sometimes just not holding their hands. Like just holding somebody's hand, right? The idea is just being nice to somebody, a nice smile, introduce yourself, tell them who you are, tell them what level you're at, what you can do for them, so they do have some understanding. The other big thing I find being professional is like actually, we're going to take this person or patient on a journey, right? So letting them know how the rest of this call is going to unfold and how you're going to get to the hospital. And be honest, especially like in Alberta, you can end up with some really long waits in the ER. So let them know that they may not get in right away, but you're going to do the best you can to either get them in or you might have to stay with them and take care of them, and you will do that.
For IFT side, another thing is like driving. A lot of patients that we pick up have chronic pain or pain somewhere. Do a lot of runs for people who have broken legs, going to rehab facilities. They're painful when you hit bumps, right? So letting know like some of our ambulances are not the greatest.
Oh, they're smooth, aren't they?
No, that's probably the opposite. The nav vans, well, depending on the nav van you get. My nav van's pretty smooth, but
Oh, you keep pounding that.
I know I do. Is let them know
We'll
like
get you a drum later.
is let them know that it's bumpy, right? Camera battery died, so we're back. Talking about documentation. We left off. You were talking about dosing.
I think it's where we're talking about dosing. So the biggest thing is, as an ACP, when I'm going to give morphine, what I do is in my narrative, I'll say I'll give 20 milligrams total morphine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give out the increments I did because I already have them time stamped. Another thing too that comes back: don't put your vital signs into your narrative.
No.
Because they've been electronically time stamped. So what happens is if you start putting dosing and anything that is time stamped through clicking buttons and that kind of thing into your narrative and they don't match, then it becomes a real problem.
Now, there is a thing that as a few of our guys on net do, is if you take vitals, don't put them in your narrative. Right. I'm doing your blood pressure. I'm putting that in my thing. However, though, some of us, when you get to the getting report and the nurse tells you, this is the vitals I last took, I put those in my narrative because those aren't mine.
Because you've been told them.
Yeah, because that's what I've been told, and like they showed me, but I didn't take them physically myself, so I never saw. But when I do take them, I put them only in my vitals. I don't put them in my narrative.
Yeah, and they're not time stamped. So anywhere that you're doing your EPCR, where you actually there's an actual legitimate timestamp.
Yeah, where you're hitting the button.
If you go to a fatality inquiry or some type of investigation hearing, you end up in court, especially court, because those lawyers would love to take a piece of you with the idea that even if it's out by 10 seconds, even a minute, even though really in the real scheme of things it's not that big of a deal, but they will take a piece of that to make it look like you don't know how to do documentation.
And that's the other thing. I use a template for mine. I use a Word documentation because I struggle at spelling and formatting. So luckily having technology and computers, I can put it into a Word document and it'll help correct. Because if you go to court and like you have spelling mistakes, those lawyers are going to tell you like none of this is right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The lawyers. Yeah.
They'll
make fun of you.
Yeah.
Actually.
And then they'll be like, well, if we can't trust you to spell, how can we trust that your documentation's right? So again, as he said, risk mitigation, cover your butt. If you can't spell, get help. Use dictionaries. We have computers.
And there's lots of things. Another a system I use.
Use your phone.
I use, actually, believe it or not, Google Docs, because I can now type all my PCR up, my narrative in Google Docs, and it actually knows when I type in OA, it knows what the next words are going to be.
Yep, it's got
and
that
I can just
generative.
tap all the way through it. But when you're doing stuff like this, especially like the Google Docs, which is an online platform that's not behind a firewall, you cannot have any patient demographics or identifiers. What I do is a lot of times when I use that, I use all the pronouns they, them.
Yep.
And that way it's totally sanitized. And then when I do bring it over at the very top of my narrative, I'll put back in the 25-year-old male found in that position. So the other thing too we're finding is a lot of people are using their texting language in their documentation. Texting language is not standard medical shorthand.
No.
Use the common medical shorthand all you want. Use the stuff that is familiar in the medical industry and the jargon. But the number of PCRs we're seeing lately, that there's a lot of them being written almost in texting language, right? And the problem with that is we don't know really what it means.
No, and sometimes it's hard to figure out. And I mean, to be fair, even some of the medical abbreviations are kind of confusing because there's some that are matched other ones, right? It's like CHF, right? That one is
congestive heart failure.
It's not easy to confuse that one.
Yeah.
But you can get, there are a lot of hospitals will have the similar ones, right? Where their abbreviation is the same 3 letters, right? What is, U of A is pretty easy because it's UAH, University Alberta Hospital.
Yeah.
Right. And then Royal Alec is RAH, which is Royal Alexandra Hospital. Those ones are not too bad. But like Strathcona is STCH because Strathcona Community Hospital, and Sturgeon County is Sturgeon Community hospital. So that's SCH and STCH. Those are very easy to get things. So in my documentation, I write the full name of the hospital and then put in brackets the abbreviated next to it. So that whenever you see that later, they can refer to the top.
Well, and you also have, like we're talking about, we have this technology that speeds that up. Yep. So there's no reason to have really a documentation. Your narrative should be sound. It should have minimal spelling mistakes. I get it. I spell terrible. I'm dyslexic. I hate writing PCRs. But because of the technology we have now, and like as Christian talks about this template he used, back in the day before we didn't have these phones, I had templates built into a patch book that I carried everywhere where I just had all the information, all the spelling I needed to make sure that's right. The other thing you want to do is look at clear times, I'm going to say clear language. Don't be afraid that I have to put down open compound fracture to the tib fib or the tibs. Like, don't be afraid. Say the lower leg had a bone sticking out 6 inches. Everybody understands what you're saying, right? Now, some people be like, well, you should be more medical and have it exactly. But sometimes that medical language, and not everybody's up to date with what each term is.
Or you're not taught what it means.
Yeah, that could happen too.
Because as an EMR, there's a lot of abbreviations we learned, but there's also a lot of abbreviations we don't learn, or names of drugs. That's the big one I find in hospitals, because you're taught all the stuff that we would use on an ambulance or you'd see, like on a call. But when you get in the hospital and then they give you this MAR that says all the drugs on it, and you're going, and especially as an EMR, right? Because they don't tell you a lot of them. Right, and PCP and ACP go a lot more in depth into pharma,
but you also have the years' experience of going to people's houses, getting the list of drugs, and going, I don't know 5 of these drugs. And then what you do is you start looking them up, and you start to recognize them, and we actually have that experience, and that's the the old school, new school thing as well. As when you're coming in, like, what are the things that is a barrier for you, right? That's a hoop jumping thing. It's just, and when you think about it, it's added cognitive load to the call you got to do.
Well, and a common one is like dilaudid, also known as hydromorphone, right? We see that. I see that everywhere.
And you actually, I didn't know they were both the same thing.
Yeah, neither did I until
I always know them as hydromorphone, right?
Right, and I know it as dilaudid.
So that's all the kind of things, like, it's amazing. So when we're talking about documentation, we need to make sure we document well.
Yep.
It covers our butt. It's about, again, I can talk about this risk mitigation until I'm blue in the face. If you do your job 100%, you're going to take care of your patient. In the end, the patient will get taken care of because you're doing your job right. Sometimes it's hard, and I get it, at 5 o'clock or maybe more like 4 o'clock in the morning, you've already done 6 or 7 trips and you're going in. A couple of our medical directors even mentioned to us that, we always hear this thing, we got to go give 100% or 110 every time. By 4 o'clock in the morning and you've done 8, 9 trips, and that's true, 8 or 9 trips can happen to you. If all you have left is 70% in that tank,
give it all that.
Show up with the 70%, right? That's all I can tell you to do is show up with the 70%, and you'll find that it's better. You can't expect to always give 110 in this raw at 4 o'clock in the morning and you've been super tired, depending on where you work. I mean, you might be able to give 110% if you're working in a rural, sleepy, hollow area, but overall, make sure that we're doing our job. Look professional. If you got to crawl out of bed, put your pants on the right way. Get your pant legs out of your socks. Maybe tuck your pants in or your shirt into your pants. Make sure your fly's done up so your shirt ain't. I've seen that one where the guy tucked his pants in, his fly was wide open, and now his shirt tails are sticking out of his fly. Like, unbelievable. So, anyways, anything you want to leave with here?
I want to say one more thing about templates. And say you're working, it's that 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're almost done. You're very close to being done. The nice thing about templates and scripting is you can walk in there and go, okay, what do I need to ask? Because I'm tired right now, and I'm functioning at full, but okay, those are the questions I need because they follow on your paperwork. Now, you don't stare at it and just read it to them, but it helps keep you guideline. Like for me, it definitely helps going, I need to ask this, that, this, and that for my documentation. And when doing that, you're also doing your patient care because you're learning your information.
Well, that's actually fantastic. The idea of scripting. Like you said, you have a script, you can read from it. Over time, that script becomes automatic.
Yep, and then you will only have to look back to it every so often.
When you're tired, it's easy for you now to rattle those things off. Now, my problem would be, what I find is when I do to rattle it off, I have to make sure I'm still listening for the answers. When I'm not tired of them in the middle of the night, even though I can still get rid of the information, I just can't. Like asking for the history, sometimes I'm not paying attention to if I'm not tired. So just got to make sure that you're giving your all, whatever you have left in the tank, and that's it. And the biggest thing is, again, be professional. Document, document, document. Take the time to document. And yes, people will be rushing you to get back out there. Take your time to make sure you document. Find ways to do it. Build templates. Use Google Docs. Have a template on your phone. Even if you just have to copy from your phone, look at it and type it out on the PCR.
Right, and I get on emergency, right? It's a little harder to do your documentation because you're got to manage that patient. On net and transfers, it's a little.
Yeah, you have a little more time.
We have a little more time, so you can do it while attending to your patient because they're not demanding. Is not the word I want to use, but.
All right.
I think that's where we're going to leave it today.
Yeah, we're going to leave it there, and we'll be back. Is there anything you want to say? Being new, you've been down 8 months. This is your second one.
Second podcast.
Yeah. Anything to look out for? What's the biggest takeaway from all this today that we talked about that helps you?
For me, it's come to work looking like you're ready to work, and cover your butt with documentation. Document everything.
All right. Again, thanks everybody for watching.